What's up, everybody? It's Greg with Delta, and this is the Be the Difference podcast. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And we bring on guest speakers. Today, I've got the honor and pleasure of welcoming Mr. Justin Bizzarro, Bizzarro. What's going on?
I love it. How are you doing today? We're reversing roles. It was awesome having you on my show, and I appreciate you having me on yours. This was an awesome introduction, man. I love it.
I appreciate it. And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would say for those of you that don't know who Mr. Justin Bizzarro is, Justin is a serial food, restaurant, technology, media, and marketing entrepreneur who helped build a 24-year-old group of food and restaurants related businesses. He created with his father and business partner out of his family's basement in 1998. He's a highly desired business management, personal and athlete growth, free market, food diversity, and entrepreneurial leadership speaker. Justin's expertise are in human growth, motivation, leadership, and management development, health foods and beverages, global lean manufacturing facilities, vertical integrated businesses, food marketing and advertising, supply chain creation and management, direct-to-consumer fulfillment, transportation, distribution, personal brand building, restaurant development and construction, and entrepreneur acceleration. Justin received his BA in International Business and Management from Dickinson College in 2002 and his MBA from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in 2014. His leadership and entrepreneur podcasts have positively impacted millions of people across the globe. And just as he was saying, I was on his podcast first, and now we're doing a little role reversal. So, yeah. Justin, it's a pleasure having you, brother.
Yeah. Where do you want me to start, man?
I like people starting at the beginning. What got you to where you are today?
So, I mean, long story short, but not really long story. And is I grew up on a horse farm. I was pretty young when I realized I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't really understand what the word was or the meaning, but I was very self-sufficient. I knew I didn't want to be relying on my parents. I knew I didn't want them to determine what toys I could and couldn't have or what kind of things I wanted. So at a very young age, about the age of 4, I convinced my parents to pay me to mow the lawn. I could not reach the pedals on the tractors. I could not really do anything other than turn it on and off and engage or disengage the mowers. So they taught me basically how to drive the tractor. They set me at low speeds, obviously, at the beginning. But from the age of 4 on, I started driving the tractor fields, having time on the farm. I did any chores that I could. I also played soccer. I had a soccer ball at my feet at all times. It was just from the age of 3 on, I was playing soccer. So a couple of things, like not the greatest student in the world, always, ever. Growing up, if the class didn't interest me, it was hard for me to engage, or even better said, if it didn't challenge me, I wouldn't be able to do well in school. So from a young age, I just picked up like the ability to make money, the ability to develop my own business. So at age 7, my parents saw that there was this gift I had, or seed that had been planted in me by God, that I developed on my own. And they taught me how to run my own business with the farm tractors and the lawn tractors that we had on the farm. I would basically lease the tractors from them. They would go get gasoline for me, cover costs, and I would pay them back. And they taught me how to charge appropriate prices per hour to go out and mow other farms and mow other for people around the country. Sorry about that. Around the county. So, and there were lots of different people that sort of picked up on it. I did lots of different farms. I did lots of different businesses. They were friends of family that I first started off with, and they were the initial people that I connected with. And I always knew that I had to do a great job. Like, it was always one of those things where if I'm going to do something for someone, mow their lawn, weed whack, spray for weeds. I eventually did all those things. I had a 4-wheeler, so I very quickly figured out how to buy a tank and put it on the back of the 4-wheeler, and also do people's spraying of weeds. I also figured out how to do spreading of fertilizer by attaching a trailer that I bought that spread seeds and fertilizer in lawns and for individuals. So at a young age, I just picked up on the ability to make money, but also find a way to sort of build relationships with people. Like that was always something that I really stuck to. I had a lot of trouble relating to kids my own age, and I had siblings, multiple siblings. And so I always was just on my own. I related to the animals a lot, and I related to, if I'm going to live my life, like I knew from a very young age that I had to have a purpose or I needed to be doing something. And if I was just playing video games or doing whatever, I wasn't really benefiting myself or my future. I don't know why. It just was one of those things that very early on in my life, I understood. There was like lifestyles of the rich and famous were like on TV. We didn't have any TV. Like we had basic things. All my friends had cable, but we were out in the middle of nowhere. So we had the basic television, but there was lifestyles of the rich and famous. And one of the things that I remember was an episode of a shipping heir out of Singapore, and he just talked about the hustle, like from a very young age, and the discipline. And I was a young kid. I was probably like 9 or 10 when that really came on, and it really stuck. Like, whatever I want to do, I've got to commit to it. I've got to give my best at it, and I've got to build character doing it, because that becomes your business. And it was just something he said on the show. So I think we all remember that show a little bit. But so from there, I played soccer. I grew a landscaping business with friends. I had a lot of friends that helped me do that. By the time I was 14, you were allowed to drive farm vehicles within a 25-mile radius in Maryland legally on the roads for farm purposes. So I figured out how to convert with a family friend, convert hay trailers into basically roadside stands, food roadside stands with like fresh produce. Basically, Whole Foods was starting to grow at the time, particularly in Maryland, and they would have seconds on their farm, produce that was either too big or too small that they would either throw away or want to get rid of. So sometimes it was we paid for it, but generally from 14 to 21 years old, I also was involved in a business, and one of the founders of a business that basically, and I had a few friends involved, that we had 4 different fruit stands, produce stands across the Washington, D.C. area in basically higher rent neighborhoods, for lack of a better term, the wealthier areas. And then that's really how I got into food. My father was in food also. He helped build a business that had 122 airline kitchens around the country that put food on airplanes around the world, including Australia, behind the Iron Curtain, in Russia, and places like that. So I gained a lot of understanding of business. The horse farm was my mom's. She was an entrepreneur. My father was more of an entrepreneur, I would say, growing within business, and then eventually getting into, like I said, Caterer was the name of the company. And so it just stuck. Every summer, I would go overseas to play soccer in Europe from the age of 13 to 18. So while I was doing that, I had friends run the business and make sure the businesses were still functioning. So I understood designating responsibility and giving ownership, not necessarily in the form of stock, from a very young age. My parents really did well by giving me the right education, making sure I had the right mentors in my life and right coaches. I was fortunate. I was stubborn though, and I was cocky, and I still had a lot of ego and insecurities for sure. But by the time I was 18, I had the experience of food. I had the experience of what Whole Foods was doing as they were building the grocery store chain. I had the experience of running at that time. By the time I was 18, I was on I had 4 businesses, including an online business that sold like telephones, cellular phones, and stuff like that I had built, called Millennium Bridge. And it just stuck. And a random bad luck thing, I brought home a dog for my mom because she had lost her dog recently, our Saint Bernard. And the dog ran off and ate one of our barn cats, like literally ate it, killed it, ate it, brought it up. So they I had to figure that out, and chasing the dog down with the cat in its mouth, I broke my foot. And would go to Europe to play soccer that year. I would have to decide what I was going to do. All my friends were going to college. I wasn't sure I was going to go to college. I had wanted to play soccer. And I sort of got stuck in my parents' house, broken foot, trying to rehab it, trying to run these businesses now, being more involved in them than I had stereotypically during the summers. And I found a new, like a greater passion for business and entrepreneurism. And I thought if I could do this on the scale that I was doing it, that we could aim bigger. So around that time, my dad received a bid for to do the Kaiser Permanente hospitals in California, and he wasn't sure he wanted to do it. He was had switched out of food by that time and was in real estate and building real estate buildings, particularly in New Jersey and Texas, called co-op offices, where they were share spaces with doctors and lawyers and professionals like that. So he's like, I don't want to do it, but I will help you do a bid if you're serious about doing it, and I will help you put together a team. And so from there, I used all the money I'd saved up for college, all the money I'd saved up from the businesses to start what then was Food Service Partners with him. And he brought in a couple business partners that he knew from the food industry. And eventually himself, he would get involved because an 18-year-old didn't have a lot of credibility for a large contract like that. It was over $30 million in food a year. And so we bid on the contract. He helped me do all of it. I worked with him. He taught me how to put together the teams, how to do the accounting, how to get financing from the bank, how to bring in business partners for a large scale project. And then, fortunately for us, he still had a lot of his connections from the airline industry. And it was before 9/11. So there was still a lot of food going on planes and a lot of training going on airplanes because it was 1998. We basically hired a crew that used to work for him in some capacity. And that's how Food Service Partners got started and where it all began. There was about 16 years of learning lessons before that. I really started learning maybe 14 years, but I started learning business as a young kid. I mean, I was even selling lemonade stands at the side of the road because my parents lived on a busy road on the farm in Pennsylvania before we moved to Maryland. So I just always had a way of chasing dreams. And so from there, Food Service Partners, we did hospitals in California. We eventually would go to Carillion in 2001 in Virginia. We do start all of the New York City hospitals, HAC, in 2005. We'd get through 9/11 in California, and that was an interesting experience. And when everyone stopped putting food on airplanes, there was a surplus of food service employees from the airline. So that really gave us the ability to build what we call central production kitchens, meaning we'd lower the amount of labor by not having a kitchen in each hospital. We'd centrally produce it at a location. We'd mass produce it all from scratch, locally sourced within 350 miles. And if they didn't have the resources, we would find the farms and partner with them to the products that we needed. And then they were guaranteed the business. So we kind of created a secondary market where they weren't relying on the grocery stores or the broadliners to buy food. We could get farmers to make a living without having to worry about government subsidies also by directly dealing with us. So, I mean, just to give you guys a perspective, Kaiser was anywhere from 7,500 to 11,000 meals a day at the beginning, and it grew from there. So quite a big contract, and that was only Northern California. We would eventually do parts of other Kaiser contracts and things like that. So the long story is then the financial crisis hit. 60% of the people having surgeries, even if it was elective, stopped having insurance. So all of a sudden there was a 60% deplete in our business, like out of nowhere, across the board. Low at that time. We were also in Texas. We were also in Florida. And so the business was like, oh no, like what happened here? We're 10 years into this business, and who would have ever thought that we'd have this happen to us? We have contracts, we're guaranteed volumes, we've been winning the contracts, and I realized, however you want to look at it, as a team, We called ourselves the strategic leadership team at Food Service Partners, that we needed to diversify. So we bought a restaurant equipment company. We bought a restaurant design company. We then formed a restaurant construction company. We also got into finding a partner out of the University of New Mexico to put POS systems on iPads and iPod touches. At the time, we were the first company to ever do that and bring those into restaurants. So during that time, the financial crisis, I realized we couldn't just be relying on one revenue stream or one revenue sector. We also got into co-packing for grocery stores. And this seems crazy because everyone knows what at-home delivered meals are, or things like Blue Apron, or companies
Hello
like that.
Fresh.
Delish, yeah, Fresh. A lot of those companies, we would eventually help them start their businesses before they'd either move out on their own, or find different co-packers across the country to diversify it in case one co-packer had a problem. But we were the company that helped them start that. So we got into the fulfillment business, particularly in health food. And we got into co-packing for grocery stores across the country. A lot of the stuff behind their deli, we package, and then what would be called components. And they would then mix the salads or the whatever at the store. And if it were meatloafs, it'd come pre-cooked. And we developed technologies to retherm and to hold product. And we were one of the first companies to move into sous vide on a mass scale. So over the lifetime, we got into a lot of different businesses. We got into farms. We owned pieces of farms, and we were diversified quite a bit. So fast forward to COVID, our business grew rapidly, obviously, because what was going on there. It hurt in some ways because of what was going on in our food systems, but we grew rapidly, and things changed also at the same time. Our government, our school systems, our hospitals, for some reason, became very desperate in those times, and very panic and fear based, and they started reaching out to organizations that were larger than us. We were the only American company to be doing what we were doing. And during that time, you would see a lot of our business, our stadiums, our elementary schools, our colleges, our middle schools, our high schools would all start to transition over to companies like Sodexo or Compass. Compass is out of the UK. Sodexo's out of France. A lot of our businesses and our broadliners like US Foods, grocery stores like Giant Martin's would all be bought by the Dutch company Ahold. And we all of a sudden and the Chinese would start buying up our farms, Bank of China in particular, or bankiers, and then as well as some nonprofits would come in and start buying up farmland and transitioning it, and we'd see the rise of plant-based food. So all of those things, weirdly, were not in our favor as a business. We locally sourced, we diversified our proteins, we rotated our menus every 4 months, or every 3 months, excuse me, 4 times a year. And so around that time, around then we had 33 companies roughly. We started spinning off companies, selling off pieces, and getting out of the business. Business partners wanted out. I had managers and executives that we entitled. For lack of a better term, the biggest mistake I made as a business person was that I gave away too much to the individuals involved. And I know that's hard for people to believe or hear as an entrepreneur or as a business person, but you entitle people to too much, or you give them too much money or give them too much privilege, they then don't work as hard for you as they should. They become comfortable. And a lot of people are like, well, how can you do that? They helped you make the money that you did, but they didn't take the risk. When they didn't take the same risk you did, they didn't have nights where sleepless nights. They could turn off the business clock at night when they leave work and turn it back on when they arrive. That's not the same as an entrepreneur. So during COVID, when everyone went home, I literally had many managers and executives no longer want to come to work. They would not come to the kitchens. We were producing food. We had food employees that we never missed a delivery, never missed a meal in 24 years. Not one delivery, not one time were we ever late for a Walmart delivery or a grocery store delivery, anything, never missed it. And we had employees that were risking their lives at the very beginning of COVID by going to the hospitals and serving the food that the nurses weren't interested in doing, for fear of health. So our employees were always dedicated, always loyal, always willing to go in. However, I created unintentionally, by sharing too much and giving away too much, my business partners and I, to executives and managers, and therefore it was almost like I'm negotiating with them whether they come to work or not. But we serve food; we're a tangible business, so if you want to be in that business, you have to come and travel to all the kitchens. That's part of your job. So it just became a very weird mess of what's loyalty, what's entitlement, what's privilege, what's really protecting our families, and what do our business partners want? Well, my business partners were all obviously older than me and in retirement age. I had a lot of managers that were of the opinion that had been with the company for, some of them 15 plus years, that they should have more say in their work schedules or working from home. And so at the end of the day, a majority of the people decided that they wanted to do things differently. So we got out of the business. We sold off the pieces, bankrupted some of them that were left that didn't match anymore when we sold them off. And I've started rebuilding over the last year what was Food Service Partners as Freedom Foods. I've also gotten into the podcast. That's why you've been on there in the media. I've been doing that for about 4 years. I'm also working on a TV show called Foodtopia. It's about going around the world and telling the story of food entrepreneurs from around the world, but particularly from the story of the food. So, for example, we at Cashew in Phuket, Thailand, we follow the cashew from the entrepreneur farmer to the entrepreneur processor of it to the restaurateur that's actually serving in the meals to the tourists. So that just gives you an example of what we're working on. I also am involved in some various other things, but really interestingly is over the last year as I've transitioned out and sort of got back in to the business and into manufacturing of food on my own, I would say, and with a different group of partners, a higher level group of partners, some of which I met at Arete, which I know you're a part of as well, Greg. It's changed my life. I'm a much happier person. I have a lot more purpose. And one of the biggest mistakes I will also say that I made is I was a young kid, so I didn't know this, and I didn't have great mentorship in this, is the importance of core values or business ethics and morals in your business. They do affect your business in the long run. And especially if you get into that 20-year period of a business, if you don't have the proper things to rest on, particularly in the food game, things like harassment, alcoholism, stuff like that can enter your business, particularly with your employees that are traveling. I've known or talked to a lot of different entrepreneurs that have seen this in their businesses that don't have those core values or don't hire based on principles. A lot of people hire based on personality. And I was one of those. That's what we did. We hired on like-minded people, not necessarily on people that followed the same principles or core values. And I know it's a state all the time, but it's one of those things where I learned the lesson the hard way. And now things are different, like I said. So that's long-winded. I apologize.
No, it's fine. I like the depth of everything that you went through. It really paints the picture for everyone listening.
Yeah.
Your expertise and everything that you've been through. I want to kind of dig into your entire entrepreneurial journey and start off with what is probably the greatest lesson that you've learned from start to finish that you've been able to apply as an entrepreneur.
Oh, I mean, put simply, it's look at people's actions, not their words. I mean, and history will tell you that. I'm a firm believer in look at people's patterns. Don't look at what they say. Don't trust what they say they're going to do. Look at their actual patterns as a human being, because we cannot help them. Our patterns subconsciously dictate what kind of human we are, and we can fix those patterns and create better habits if we're self-aware. But I would say humans, and humans dictate our businesses. Really, that's what makes it work. So I know we're in the world of AI and stuff like that. I still believe that that matters. But I would say second to that is we don't ask humans enough about their support systems when we're hiring them, because humans can be successful or not successful merely by their support system. Do they have a supportive spouse? Do they have a supportive family? Things like that that really matter. What's their home life look like? And is work an escape from that, or is work a complement to that? And I know it's a little looking at life differently, but if you want the best humans and you want your business to do well, you have to have humans that have a good support system. And by that I mean they're willing to support you, failure or not,
Mhm.
as you're growing. So it's not anti-failure. I prefer humans who are willing to fail, and learn from it, but they've got to be self-aware and have enough self um, discipline to be able to, come back from those failures, get back up and learn your lesson, and, not let it happen again. And I can be a stubborn person. I can fail a few things and have a little bit of insanity, meaning do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. But it's at some point you have to be self-aware enough to realize, hey, I need to do this differently, or we need to look at this differently. It's not working.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. You're absolutely right. That's a hard lesson for anyone, especially as a business owner, a young business owner, for you to learn, because especially for an industry where you're doing a lot of recruiting, like for me in insurance and in financial services, it's mass recruiting because you're trying to get as many people across the country that can produce, and pulling the wrong person in that does not fit your core values, no matter what they say, can be detrimental to your business. And man, that's a hard lesson I had to learn too, because a lot of people, everyone is a hard worker. Everyone, no one's gonna be like, I'm not a hard worker. I cut corners, I do the minimum required, but I do it with style. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to really notice it, but like, I'm going to get the job done, but it's going to be like right at the finish line. And I'm going to do the minimum amount possible, but you're going to be pleased, right? No one's going to say that. Everyone's going to say, I'm the hardest worker ever. Like, I'm really dedicated to my work, and I really want to make this opportunity last. Like, I believe in this. They're going to say everything. You have to look at their actions.
Yeah. And
So,
and I think, it's hard to determine that on a resume or in an interview. You need to be able to ask the right questions. And,
yeah.
usually the soft skills that determine it. It's not necessarily that job experience. I found like people that didn't have, or humans that didn't have experience in food, end up being some of my best managers and executives in the long run, because they knew what they didn't know, and they had certain amount of humility to them, and they had a willingness to learn, and not only willingness to learn, but they understood that if they were going to rise in the company, they had to be able to teach everyone behind them, because someone eventually, they were replaceable. I mean, the best humans realize that we're expendable. What does that mean? That means I'm either going to get replaced at some point, or I can not be replaced by moving up in the organization. And if I'm going to move up in the organization, I need to train my replacement, and they will continue to support me as I move up. So, how do you build a band of brothers or a band of sisters that support you moving up in an organization, or even as an entrepreneur? Is as you move up, you need to move up everyone along with you, but give them the tools to do so and the skills to do so. Because if they don't, you're setting yourself up to fail. And I would say that training programs, wow, to answer your other question, I think one of the things that you have to do at the very beginning of your business is set up standard operating procedures, no different than the military. And every part of your business needs to have those processes and procedures, so you can fall back on them with the team that as you build. And it's like, literally, it's the hardest thing I find when I coach individuals or entrepreneurs, is documenting the journey. You've got to document the journey, because you need to be able to fall back on that to educate those who come behind you.
Mhm. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. You talked a little bit when we had our podcast about some of the challenges that you had faced in life and as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge that you've been able to overcome, and how did you overcome it
Uh,
in your business?
Good question. Well, I would say that Wow, the biggest challenge. It's interesting. As I changed as a human, I would say about 15 years into my business, maybe actually 12 years in, I changed quite a bit in my, well, 12 years into Future with Partners. So I was about 30 years old. Um, I went through some major life transitions. I started going through a separation. I was married at the time. I started changing my circle or group of friends quite a bit. I mean, I didn't really go out and party as a kid or in my 20s just because I was trying to run multiple businesses. My father also went into the hospital and had part of his large intestine removed and had a colostomy bag, which they would eventually reverse. But he was like sort of out of my life as a business partner or mentor for about 18 to 20 months. And during that time, I went through a pretty large transition. I stopped drinking alcohol just because I was like, it's a distraction, and I don't like the way that I feel afterwards. I started changing my diet more towards what we were actually doing in our business. So I started living more by the principles that we were living by in food. And I started seeing things more altruistically. Like I really started seeing what kind of impact am I having on the planet? What kind of things are we doing? And weirdly, as I changed that perspective and I started focusing the business, I started believing in core values, like we talked about. I started making enemies within my own business or with my own business partners. It was unintentional. I didn't think that. I really thought by, hey, this makes sense. This is logical. If we're going to have a purpose at our business, why not make it so it takes care of our children and our legacy? But what I found interestingly was the hardest lesson I learned is most individuals care more about money than anything else. And it was never about that to me. Interesting, even though I talked about my ability to do it as a kid, it was for me, it was never like that. I was always trying to do the best thing possible. I was always trying to provide people with solutions. Like even mowing lawns, who's the lady that can't mow her lawn anymore because her husband passed away at what age? And it just seemed like I was always helping people. So why not take that on a larger scale? But the more altruistic I got, interestingly, the more I noticed the greed around me. Um, and the mistake there was the hardship was get rid of the individuals then that I should have um, that were causing me problems or didn't get rid of those business partners that I thought were problems at the time or figure out an exit strategy for them or for myself. And I would say that it cost me a lot in later years. Those individuals become bullies. They become harassers in your business. They steal from your business. They become entitled to things. And for me, the hardest lesson was realizing that not all humans are good. It's hard for me to even say that. I think we all have the potential to be good humans. I just didn't realize based on the life I had, and I would say privilege. Did I earn it? Did I work hard? Did I educate myself? Did I put myself through schools? Did I have a lot of great support from my parents? Yeah, absolutely. But in all that, and even the travel I'd done around the world, I had a almost false belief that how humans were or how trustworthy they are. I had some bad stuff happen to me as a kid with a family member, just to part of my drive, part of my isolation. I did have a really bad period where I had a distant family member take advantage of me inappropriately as a 3 and 4 year old and 5 year old, and did take matters into my own hands and with a pocket knife from the barn and made sure that stopped because I didn't know what else to do because it was just one of those situations. I didn't think anyone would believe me. But even with that incident, I had this underlying belief that all humans were good, and which is different than believing that they have the potential to be good. I think there's a big difference there. And I learned that the people I trusted the most or I thought were the most loyal to me were actually the ones that were taking advantage of me in my businesses the most. They were padding the expense reports. They were not working the hours they said they were. They were always working with the client or hedging in case they ever got fired to take the intellectual property and the stuff with them in the business. So the lesson there is like, um, I failed as a leader. I failed the employees who were working hard. I felt that I let them down. I brought a lot of bad behaviors into our company. I allowed a lot of harassment. I allowed a lot of stealing to go on in our business. I didn't always have what I would say proof, but I suspected it was going on. And I would say I kind of turned a blind eye to it for a little bit because they had been loyal and they had been with our company so long. And as I started to address it, it just got worse, or they would come after me or bully me or come after my family, which was interesting because I just didn't ever have that happen in my life. Like even with sports or with business, I had already done well, always done well. I just didn't expect people to take advantage of it or me or whatever. And I didn't even know, I'd never really been bullied in my life. So I didn't even know how to handle all of that. It was a very interesting scenario, or the phone calls or the emails or the harassment when I started firing people. And I sort of, I don't know how to explain it, but I wanted everyone to like me. I wanted that. That's what I thought I was doing in business. That's what I thought I was doing by taking care of everyone. And I thought everyone was my friend. And another thing, just because you're in business with people doesn't mean that they're your friends. And because I'd started the business so young and invested all my time and energy into it, I didn't really have, anyone else. And so, I mean, really, how did I get out of it? I mean, it wouldn't be until a year ago that I really truly got out of that terrible cycle that went for 12 years, where the stealing, the trying to figure it out, the harassment that went on in the company. And I feel terrible about it. Honestly, it was a very successful business. We had a lot of successful things, but somehow we were still made money, even with a very negative culture that weirdly, I was trying to grow a positive culture, a more altruistic culture, try to be more at the farms. But what I found is like, I mean, it's cliche, but when you spread light on darkness, sometimes the darkness grows. It's not necessarily that the light spreads in the darkness at first. There's a period where the light fights back. I mean, the darkness fights back. And if you're a believer in Christianity or spiritual like I am, like the devil will fight back. When you try to really do good or you try to do good in this world, the individuals that are around you that don't believe in that or are comfortable, are good with being mediocre, that they will push back. And if they think you're trying to take away from them, they will steal from you. They will take advantage of people. They will harass your employees. And if you give them a lot of money, money just, this is the biggest lesson and it goes back to the beginning of the conversation, is money exemplifies or magnifies whatever other character defects someone has. And that's why, as entrepreneurs, we have to have somewhat responsibility over how much we give away, because we can ruin families, we can ruin children, we can ruin legacies by giving parents too much. And they may necessarily not have earned that much. They may have earned some, but they don't have the lessons that go along with being an entrepreneur, or the lessons of growth that sort of humble us as entrepreneurs or humble us as business leaders. And it when it goes back to looking at that pattern of a human, you need to be aware, because not all humans deserve to be promoted. Not all humans deserve to get a bonus. And it's hard for us to believe because we think that everyone contributes to the bottom line. But just because they contribute to the bottom line today doesn't mean they will do it tomorrow. And it's one of the craziest things I've ever learned. But a business is about knowing your financials and about managing your cash flow. But more than that, it's about managing the humans. And it's about setting proper expectations in your business and having proper core values and hiring and firing around those. And, I had different philosophies than my business partners in life. And they, in some ways, I felt they were older than me and they had mentored me and coached me. And I was in a position where I didn't know necessarily or have the confidence per se to step up to them. I would say 75 hard did a lot of that for me. It gave me a lot of discipline and confidence to start standing up to them, which just made matters worse. Which, who wants to give up a 24-year company, you know, that does 9 figures in food a year? But at the end of the day, what's worth it? I am 43 years old. I can build another company in 24 years. You know, I have that lifespan potentially. So, you know, how did I do it differently? There's sometimes, and I know not all people agree with this, but sometimes you just need to pull the ejection switch and you need to bail and you need to rebuild. And that's okay. Plenty of people do it in life. So I think that answers your question.
It does. It does. Actually, you gave me a lot of good nuggets there. I appreciate you sharing your challenges that you had. There's very unique challenges. I can see a lot where that comes from in my short time in business ever since I got in the military. Similar situations have happened, comparable situations have happened with me, and that's some insight that you talked about that I think is helpful for me where I'm at. And so I'm got 6 minutes before I got to jump on another call. So I want to bring you back for a part 2, just because you have so much value to give with your experience and years in business that I really, now that we've kind of done an introduction, I really want to dig in the weeds and talk more about some business skills and some helpful tactics for people. Before we go, the last question I ask all my guests is, you have the opportunity to sit with, learn from, break bread with any person in history, alive or deceased. Who
Yeah,
are those 3 individuals and why?
it's pretty easy for me. Well, I mean, I would choose one of the 3 or all 3. Definitely like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, just
Yeah.
because philosophy is just such a big part of my life. You know, even John Locke and sort of his perception of democracy and his philosophy around government. But I would say more than them would probably be Jesus, Ben Franklin, and Martin Luther King.
Ben
I don't
Franklin's a good one.
Yeah, and Ben Franklin's discipline on a daily basis is just still, even with doing 75 hard, I read his autobiography and I'm like, his discipline was on a whole new level. And his ability to build his character with his, you know, certain things. If anyone knows, you should go look at the Ben Franklin autobiography and see the things in the way he laid them out in a grid system to improve his character. It's just, and he was just a statesman. I would also say maybe even like Leonardo da Vinci, just because he succeeded at so many different things in an age. And it was the Renaissance, but it was also coming out of a dark age in a time where he basically almost invented the steam engine. You know, he created helicopters, but he also painted and he also created sculpture. So he's this weirdly entrepreneurial individual before his time. I would say, but mainly Jesus and Ben Franklin and Martin Luther King. I just feel like they made such differences and had such impact in the world, for sure.
Dude, I love that. I absolutely love that. Justin, thank you so much for
Yeah,
jumping on the Be the Difference podcast. I know that you provide a lot of value, man, and I want to definitely bring you back for a part 2.
great.
Um, for those of you watching, if you watched till now, then obviously you got some value out of this, and you learned a little bit from Justin and his past, his challenges, and what he's learned as an entrepreneur. It only takes 30, 60 seconds for you to share this content with somebody else that can also get value from it. Maybe someone that just started their entrepreneurial journey or looking to start it, and they want to get as much information as possible to help them to find success quicker. It only takes you, like I said, short amount of time, but it means the world to both Justin and I when you do that. So do us a favor, share this content in order for us to grow organically and to get the message out there and impact as many lives as possible. This has been the Be the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Greg Birch. Until next time, we'll see you.